Well, now you see why we do what we do. We believe everybody has a story to tell and talk about three incredible stories. I'm, I can do this for years, and every time I'm here, I'm amazed by what the local talent does. So I, oops, and I blocked some of the very important things. As you noticed, it takes a village to do the series, to run docs. And while we're setting up, one of the important people is right there is Adele. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Am I okay? Okay. 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 Good evening. That'll wake everyone up a bit. So you saw um, everyone who has participated, contributed to the film festival and to Docs. Adele Schmidt is our artistic director. Somewhere, probably out there doing her job, is Stacy Toll, who has done magic work here. And then we have some other very important people that I could not do my work without. Our treasurer and vice chair, Lee Boyle. And back there, Mr. G.T. Keplinger, who for years is helping us do all of the magic behind the scenes. And with that, I think we're going to get the panel ready. I'm going to introduce Josh Davidsburg. And here is Stacy from, and we're going to get going with the Q&A. Josh is someone I've known for several years, and just a little bit of background, because there is a connection between Josh and Tom. Josh, several years ago, did a work in progress, I believe, and had his film Queen of the Capitol here at Docs in Progress, and here's a little bit of trivia. It was the last film shown at Docs before we closed for COVID. And so with that, Josh and I know each other from Video Consortium, who's a new partner, and he is also a lecturer at the University of Maryland. And with that, take it away, Josh.
Great. Thanks, Barbara. All right, you guys want to have a seat?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm Josh Davidsburg. I am a senior lecturer at the Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. And I want to introduce Tom and John. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Say a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. My name is Tom Clement. I grew up here, left for a while, and came back. I worked for Scripps News for many years. When I made this Projecting Protest, I was an employee for them. But I'm a documentary filmmaker and cinematographer, and I work in,
Hi, I'm John Kinhart. I'm a Maryland native, and I actually studied art at Maryland Institute College of Art, and I started to take video classes there and started to drift away from art a little bit and became a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and worked professionally as a video editor and sometimes shooting. And recently I did actually get back into painting, which was really fulfilling.
So I want to start off with just basic. I mean, Tom, you mentioned it a little bit in the documentary, but how did you all come up with the idea, and how did your film kind of come together? So, Tom, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. I was working for Scripps covering a political debate in Pennsylvania, and activists were projecting onto the building in the back of my live shot. I was working with a reporter, which I thought was very entertaining. Because I was, it was just a long day, and they were projecting tax the ultra rich. And I was like, well, this is the most righteous thing that's sort of being said all day. It was the John Fetterman and Minaj debate. You guys remember that? It was like big news at the time. There was a lot of press. And so these guys were successfully getting tax the ultra rich in the background of like all the news cameras, like Fox, CNN, like all of them. which I just thought was impressive. And the people who were organizing the debate were mad. They were really trying to get them to stop, and they wouldn't. And they tried to get the police to get them to stop, and the police were like, the debate organizers want you to stop, and they're like, okay. And they just like kept doing it. So there's like, they couldn't force them to stop. And I was like, this is fascinating that this is like their free speech to disrupt in this way, but it's really harmless. And then so I got their contact info and started from there, and then that led to the neo-Nazis later.
We'll definitely, I got some questions about that too. John, how about you?
I did a documentary about Don Dohler about 20 years ago, one of my early projects, and it had a pretty good run in film festivals, and I always would just revisit Don Dohler for like web videos, because I had a lot of material that I shot that I didn't use, and then a couple years ago when I was busy working on another documentary, that's when I discovered that there was this coincidence that George Stover's ancestor was buried in the Fiend Graveyard, and so I just made a note of the address of the location, the church, and kind of stashed that away, thinking when I can get away and revisit that, I will. And so then after I finished this recent feature documentary, I was just wandering around in the autumn, beautiful autumn, and I guess it was late 2024, and just looking for landscapes to film, and then a light bulb went off. I was like, oh yeah, the Fiend Graveyard, let me go check that out. And there's something just awesome about drone footage, so like that, after doing that, I was just more motivated to figure out how to tell this story, which I only intended it to be just a fun web video, but the more I explored it, the more it kind of had, I think, some potential to have some cinematic excitement.
And you cut it, right?
Yeah.
The editing was very good. Makes sense to your video.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. I noticed that I was checking the editing credit of yours because I was like, great editing.
Yeah, well, thank you. I don't bill myself as an editor, but I did edit it.
Can you talk a little bit about Dohler? Like, who is he? What does he mean to you? What can you and talk
Sure.
about the fan base a little bit?
Well, Don Dohler was the second person to make a feature film in Baltimore, the first being John Waters, but two totally different types of filmmakers. Dohler was also famous for creating a magazine called Cinemagic magazine, which was first of its kind back when magazines were really a thing, that kind of told how to do things, like how to make things step by step. And he had a lot of fans who went on to great Hollywood careers from that magazine, and he took a lot of those connections to make films starting from 1976 all the way until his death in 2006. He made 11 films, and The Fiend was his second film, and although somewhat amateurish and a little slow and it needs a little more action and plot, it helped him kind of learn a lot of more filmmaking techniques, which he applied in later films, which a couple of them, like Night Beast, for example, have a pretty dedicated following. There's a lot of genre horror fans, and they're just hungry for new material, and so Dohler has a bit of a global following because of his films and because of his influence with Cinemagic magazine. And so I made a documentary about him, finished in 2007 and screened at the Maryland Film Festival, and I knew the guy, and kind of developed a bond with him. So when he passed away in 2006, like I was kind of grieving, and so one of the ways I coped with that grief was just revisiting, and making short films and web videos for fans.
And Tom, can you talk a little bit about the subjects that were in your film? How difficult was it to connect with them and to get them to sit down with you?
Sort of surprisingly, Robin Bell, the DC projectionist who did all the Trump Hotel stuff, he was the hardest to get in contact with.
Really?
Yeah. He's like a celebrity in the projection world, so I couldn't just like email him on his site. I had to go through. We ended up having a mutual friend that connected us. The neo-Nazis, I emailed and just told them that I was working on this project, and they had been because of them, the law in Florida changed. So like they had been getting a lot of attention for their upsetting projections. And so I just told them what I was doing and asked them if I could talk to them, and they said yes.
They're totally,
I mean,
totally-
they like want attention. I mean, that's, they're.
How do you prepare for that interview with the neo-Nazis, and what's going through your head as you're talking to them?
I was trying, and I did really stay focused on like the medium and the process of like how you get a message out, because I didn't want to platform them. I didn't really care like what they think. I mean, I know what they think. We all know what they think. But it didn't. I mean, I was nervous for sure before I went to actually meet them. Once I was around them for a little while, it just seemed like silly more than anything. Like, it's definitely intimidating and it's scary what they're saying, but the actual like feeling of being with them it's like I was in like a high school boys locker room. There's like some funny shots that like didn't go in the film of them like stumbling over like setting up their flags and sort of like bickering with each other.
So you both edited your own film. Can you talk a little bit about the editing process? Like, how hard was it to decide what went in the film, what you cut out? John, you want to start?
Sure. A little bit different than my other projects, which is a little bit more kind of searching and then figuring it out in post. With this one, I actually created a storyboard and kind of knew exactly where it was going, although towards the end, the storyboard said, interview George Stover and, just ask him this, and then go to the graveyard with Stover for the first time. And I didn't know it was going to happen, but so for me, with this film, I kind of had a sense of the whole picture when I kind of came up with the idea.
And Tom?
I'm reflecting. I'm like, what was the process of editing? I mean, I got a lot of feedback here, but also like leading up to the work in progress screening. I think when I edit documentaries like this project or in other projects, I'm going through different versions of outlines. There's like different stages of the project. Like in the very beginning, I need a very high level outline, and then once I like start to get footage and start to fill it in, I'm like, oh, that's a terrible idea. Then I like redo it, and I feel like I redo it like probably like 4 times before I get to a rough draft. But I remember I'd be shooting for a while, and we just like needed something to illustrate the tension and ambiguity of like, is this legal? And so I was waiting for that moment, and then the Capitol scene with Bill Moyer, who it happened like very spontaneously. It was like, I'm coming to DC. We're going to do this thing. Do you want to come? I was like, absolutely, I want to come. This is what I've been waiting for. And then that scene ended up being like, a third of the film. But I was cutting before that. That was like, once I had that, I was like, okay, phew. Like, now we actually have a film, and before that, it didn't feel complete.
Okay. And now I can open it up to the audience. Anybody in the audience have questions? Could I walk the mic over there without? Yep. Okay.
Thank you. All 3 of these films were excellent, by the way. So they were really good. Just regarding the projection film, have there been any new laws passed last year in 2025 regarding projections? And then regarding the Fiend film, did Doller have any kids, and did any of his kids follow in his path in filmmaking?
Why don't you go first?
No, there have not been any new laws passed. However, good news for projectionists. In the UK, if you remember in the news, there was the Trump Epstein stuff projected on Windsor Tower. All those activists were detained and then released without charges. So, not illegal.
Doller had 2 kids, Greg and Kim, and they appear in many of his films. The closest one followed in his footsteps is Greg is a photographer, still working in Baltimore. Kim lives, I think, in Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure what she does for a living, but she does. Neither are like filmmakers, but they both are still, a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for their father's legacy, and appreciated the documentary that I made, and anytime I've wanted to revisit Doller, they've always been like, yeah, go for it.
Hello. I had a specific question in the projecting protest area, more a technology question because I'm more of a techie kind of guy, and how technology of, as for example, projecting has evolved or can be done. Are you aware in the projecting community, this kind of projecting protest community, anyone who's using what's called laser projection? Laser projection, which is
Yeah, so the
a more
Nazis used laser
Exactly.
projection. So
who's using it now?
the neo-Nazis were using laser projection. That's part of why it's more effective as a projection technique, and why a lot of the, like, Bill and Robin won't do it, because it's dangerous. Like, if you hit someone in the eye, you can blind them, but it's cheaper, and you can, like, project further and more clearly. So the Nazis were able to, like, hide while they did it, and it's the size of, an orange.
I'm not sure if, well, for long distance, I don't think it'd be a size or but as in using laser projecting, any aspects that could be allowed to have a more artistic projection, meaning project actually on surfaces that are far different than what they're considering as such. I mean, you can actually project on a tree, project on a cloud, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the artists do that. There's Christoph. I have a hard time saying his name. Yeah, there's a whole series of projections that are done on statues that are more sort of artistic meditations on colonialism or various topics. But yeah, that's really cool and effective. And I think I was really focused on dissent, on confronting power with a projection. And I think the museum artistic projections are great and should be done, but that's for this project, that was my lane.
Any other questions? Yep.
So I really enjoyed all three of them. But I have a question about the projection, about the legality, because if I understood correctly, the legality of the projection actually depends on where the projection is coming from. So if you're on a public sidewalk, that's kind of the public square, regardless of where the beam goes. But if you were on private property, the owner could stop you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the basic.
Got it.
That's the basic argument for why it's legal. Is because speech done in public areas is free speech. If it's protected speech.
Does anyone else?
We got one more. Okay.
Editing question. How did you decide to do narration, I think, versus no narration? And then maybe some tidbits about pieces of transition when you didn't have principal photography, when you didn't have things that were filmed, but you needed to do a transition, or like, how did you decide, okay, I'm going to shoot, I don't know, the website, and I'm forgetting the details of every film.
Well, I narrated mine just because it seemed the most logical for the story. In past documentaries, I have not narrated, but for a couple I have, and it's very convenient because I don't have to find somebody else to say something I feel like should be said. So in that regard, it's just pragmatic to move the story along. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of interesting materials like census reports, and I don't know, I just like standing in front of a canvas. I just tried to, see what creatively I could come up with what I had. So, in one case, like, I took a shot pulling back from the tombstone and had that transition into a census report, and it just felt like a move that flowed and took us from one location to another kind of visual world. And yeah, I mean, it's just the creative process of kind of searching and seeing what works.
Did you do the graphics too?
Yeah.
That was also very good. And I was like, wow. That's,
Thanks.
Just one more real quick for the Fiend film. I think John Waters and Doller knew each other. Is that right? Or did they?
I'm not sure. They probably met. I'm not. I know that Stover and John Waters kind of still chat and interact. And Stover was telling me about that. They would have these John Waters camps or something where, like Mink Stoll and some of the other actors would go, and you could pay to hang out with the John Waters crew. And George, I think, was part of that a couple times. But you know, the only interaction I heard with was that George Stover showed Night Beast to John Waters, and the impression I got was that John Waters wasn't that impressed or wasn't that into it or whatever. But yeah, they were just in totally different worlds, I think.
And last one. Did you talk to John Waters for your film?
No,
That's it.
I thought about it, but you know, when I was younger, and I guess I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was gonna just be like, I'm gonna do this without John Waters. Kind of silly or whatever, but and you know, but I got other interesting people. Like I went to the ABC lot in California and got an interview with J.J. Abrams. At the time, he was doing Lost. You know, before he became, you know, mega director of Star Trek and Star Wars. So you know, at that time, I was like, I don't know, like it's just some youthful thought in my head. I was like, I don't need John Waters, because I had heard that he wasn't into his film. So I was like, well, he's not going to want to be bothered by this.
Did Stover take any convincing to be in the film, and what was it like for him to reconnect with you know, family member passed?
You know, he was pretty game for it, and you know, he's practically retired at this point, but you know, he's got this incredible list of movies, and I think he was enthusiastic about kind of digging up this story and adding depth to Fiend, which is not one of Doller's most celebrated movies, and you know, maybe one of his least known movies, but important to Doller's children's, Greg and Kim, because they have a lot of, you know, fond memories of making the movie with their father. So so for any kind of Doller fans, extreme Doller fans, it's an important film, and you know, I guess we felt that we could kind of deepen people's relationship with it, and but I think that, you know, when a documentary film is really good, you can make it accessible to people beyond, you know, super fandom, and that's always been something that I've wanted to search for, is to make your subject, which potentially could be esoteric or accessible, to make it as accessible as possible.
And Tom, what was going through your head the moment where you show, and I can't remember his name, but you show him the NPR article? Was it NPR that had written about the
about the Nazis?
Yeah, that's such a great moment.
Yeah, I mean, Bill is such an evangelist of projection, and he feels like ownership to some degree. I mean, he sends projector kits to frontline activists all over the country, and he's like really about it. And then to see, I just knew that he was going to feel betrayed, and it had just happened when we were shooting that interview. That article had come out like in the last week.
You mentioned that you didn't want to platform them. Has anybody criticized you for platforming them?
No. I thought they would. People have asked me about it, but
I mean, for your thesis of what are the limits of free speech, I feel like the Nazi element is essential, because if it was just, you know, the liberal component, then, you know, it would have been interesting. It would have been, you know, kind of fun to see the conflicts with the police. But that particular angle, like, really demonstrates, like, how far can you push this? Who's allowed to use this?
yeah, just how complicated it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Any last questions? Yep.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed all these films, so thank you very much for that. I do have a question regarding the Fiend film and just sort of your documentary making in general. I'm curious, when you're making documentaries about these films and these filmmakers. You mentioned you sort of want to deepen people's connections with the films. I'm curious how it affects your connection with the film and your relationship with it. If you see it in a different light, if it deepens your connection, and I'm also curious how it translates to your documentary making. If that inspiration from these movies actually translates to inspiration for your documentary making.
Yeah, it definitely, making of it has deepened my connection, and maybe that was the goal. I mentioned that I made a feature film and went to a lot of festivals and did a lot of Q&As, which I'm not very good at. But so I wanted to retreat a little bit, and so when I kind of discovered this Fiend Graveyard, I kept going there all the time. You know, I'd get up at 4 a.m. and try to get the sunset, or I'd spend the night there and shoot the stars. And so I guess I was like getting addicted to the solitude of doing that. But also, like I said, I still kind of am grieving Don Dohler, because I knew him. He was just a really cool, fun guy, and I just wish he could have had more time, because his films have. I don't know if anybody saw the film Mandy, the Nicolas Cage movie. It premiered at Sundance, but there's a moment where Nick Cage and Andrea Riseborough are watching a film, and that's one of Don Dohler's films, Night Beast. And 3 of his early films have been rescanned, including Fiend, and released on Blu-ray. So when that happens, I'm just like, man, I wish Dohler could have seen that. He would have just been so proud. So so it's personal, and maybe you're supposed to be objective as a documentary filmmaker, but with all of my subjects, I've developed a tight bond with them. So yeah, and I miss Dohler, and I just start cooking up these ideas for how I can revisit and re-explore that world.
One last question.
I mean, you were covering this during a very horrific period in the war in Gaza, which gets close to people defining it as a genocide, which is something I think that other groups want to define as being exclusive to the Holocaust, and to use it then would be to appropriate an anti-Semitic symbol, and kind of to equate criticism of Israel with an anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And you deal with the Nazis, and that's clearly anti-Semitic, but when you deal with this other kind of thing, getting close to it, you have to either back off or jump into it.
Totally. I was intentional about this, because when I was making the film, like, a lot of the activism was anti-war, violence in Gaza projection. So to put them side to side with criticism of Israel and criticism of the war, with actual people who are anti-Semitic, and that's like their whole thing. Like, I don't think it's confusing, but I was very intentional to separate them a little bit and not put them just make it clear, which I hope I did.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No?
All right, let's hear it for this panel, for the filmmakers and Josh. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is first night of Community Stories 26. One little bit of housekeeping and one little bit of a surprise. We love surprises. Bit of housekeeping, really important. On the back of your chair, if you don't have one, we'll get you one. It's our event evaluation.